hit record. See. Hi, I'm Edwin Rutch, founder of the Empathy Tent, and this is the beginning of our series of empathy circles that's hosted by the Empathy Tent between the political left and the right. And our intention is to contribute to building, to bridging the social and political divides and build a culture of empathy. And this means for every person to be seen, heard, and understood to their satisfaction. And also, as viewers, if you're watching this, we invite you to take part in future dialogues between the political left and right. To find out more about how to take part, you can visit our website at empathytent.com, or other website is empathycircle.com, and there's instructions for how you can take part in these dialogues, and not only take part, but also become a facilitator and facilitate your own or other dialogues in the future. So wanted to start off by, let's see, what should we do first? So we'll start with how we're going to be using the empathy circle process. And did everybody get a chance to read our instructions? There's a couple of people here familiar with that. You didn't. Okay, so for you, Tyler, especially for you, we're going to review the process that we use. So for the empathy circle. So in this process, one person is going to speak, and they're going to select who they want to speak to. So Tyler, if you wanted to speak to Rick, you'd select Rick to speak to, and then you'll have 3 minutes to talk about the topic at hand. And Rick will reflect back his understanding of what you have said until you feel that you've been heard to your satisfaction, that what you've said, he has been able to reflect that back to where you say, yeah, you really understood what it is that I said. And then you'll have 3 minutes, and then once that time is up, then would be Rick's turn, the person that you're speaking to select someone to speak to, and then they'll speak to them, and they'll get reflection. And it just goes around like that for the time allotted, and we have 2 hours for this empathy circle. Yeah. So there's a couple of tips. One is the speaker, you want to pause periodically so that the person can reflect back what they're saying. So if you say too much, it's hard for them to remember it and reflect it back. So pause, periodically. And if you're done speaking before the 3 minutes is up, then you can just say, I feel fully heard, and that's an indication that you're done speaking, and it's the listener's turn to speak. And as the listener, you're only trying to reflect back what you're hearing the speaker say. You're not trying to put in your own ideas, your own thoughts into it. You're just trying to accurately reflect back the essence of what the person is saying to you. And so, yeah, that's kind of the essence of it. And just another tip, if you're a speaker and you are asked a question, for the listener, just reflect back the question. You don't answer the question, you just reflect back what the person is saying. So whatever the person says, you just reflect back, and then when it's your turn, you can choose to answer the question or not. So to begin with, if you haven't done this process, it can seem a little awkward. Yep, Dave?
Let's model that question story. So Edwin, I'm curious how you got involved with this.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you're really wondering, and curious, how I got involved in doing this.
Right. So that's how we do that. Yeah.
So instead of answering it, yeah, thanks for that. So to begin with, if you haven't done the process, it's just a bit awkward, to get into it. But after time, everybody settles into it, and it becomes, fairly, everybody becomes fairly comfortable with it. So we're going to start off, we have our topic. Before we go into our topic and so forth, we just want to do one short round, in 15 seconds, to introduce ourselves. Your name, where you're from, and if you're on the left or the right. And I'll start to model it. I'm Edwin Rutch, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, more specifically El Cerrito, which is just north of Berkeley. And I grew up on the political right. I've moved over time to the left, and now I'm moving to the empathy, the empathic. So I'm kind of like leaving both and going into this empathic, movement or whatever. So I just go around here on my screen. So Tyler, you're next on the screen here. If you'd like to just introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Tyler Morris. I also live in the Bay Area. I live in San Francisco. I would describe myself as a reluctant conservative. I was born here in San Francisco in the 80s, and so I was raised on the left. And I have only in the past year or two kind of switched over to the right. I do also have military service that probably has something to do with that, but.
Okay, thanks. Dave, our co-facilitator. Dave, if you want to just introduce yourself.
I'm Dave Gottfried. I also live in the Bay Area. I live in Berkeley. I'm on the left. I come from the left. My family was on the left. But I'm for everybody. I mean, I'm from the left in terms of policy is what I would say. But I'm for everybody.
Okay, Rick.
Yeah, Rick Feltington is my name. I'm in the Hudson Valley region of New York State. And I grew up with a family on the left, and I position myself even a little further on the left as a democratic socialist, but I don't really like to define myself, and I feel like connection and everyone being heard is what's more essential than the specific strategy. So that's it for me.
Great. Thanks. Evan?
Evan McGore, grew up in Long Island, more in the sort of liberal kind of typical New York fashion, and then also sort of on a journey of discovering more of the empathic side. And one thing that's got me feeling like an outcast in a lot of circles, which I said on the last one, is that I believe in unconditional empathy for all humans. Maybe I'll make that into creatures in general or animals one day that includes humans. So maybe I'll add that. I'll tweak it a little bit as I go.
Okay, thanks. I might be coughing because here in the San Francisco Bay Area, it's like the worst air quality in the world right now because of the fires that are happening in California. Okay, so we're going to start off with our topic, which was the most popular topic. We did a poll on our website or Facebook page, and the question was, what are your thoughts, feeling, concerns about the role of racism and sexism in politics and policies? And that's going to be our topic for the next hour and 45 minutes. And we're going to start off with 3-minute turns. And then after about an hour or so, we might bump it up to 5 minutes. So to begin the process, I'll just model it. If someone wants to speak to me, you can speak to me. And Dave is not really a participant. Maybe towards the end, he'll become a participant. He is a co-facilitator. And it's really between the three of you. Right now, primarily. You can also select anyone that you want. It's your choice of whoever you want. You can also try to spread the attention, when it's your turn if someone hasn't spoken, but ultimately it's up to you to speak to whoever you want to speak to. And I think we're ready to get started. And if someone just wants to speak to me, I'll model it. Do you have something, Dave?
Yeah, I've got this sheet that says, it's probably backwards, right?
No, it looks right.
Okay. That means the time is up, basically.
Okay, yeah, and if
So
you see that, kind of wraps it up.
I'll do this, 15 seconds early, or maybe 30 seconds early. At 2.5 minutes, I'll do this. You'll know you got another 30 seconds. And then at the end, I'll do this if we're running out, if it's bumping up against the time.
Okay.
Okay?
Great. And so let's get started. Best way is just to do it, just jump into it. Who wants to start and speak to me just so I can model the empathic listening the first time? Okay, Tyler, just go.
I'll go for it. Especially because I kind of wanted to open by introducing the rest of the group to a little bit more of my story, so that everybody understands where I'm coming from. I was, like I said, I was born here in the 80s. My mother wanted a daughter so badly that she decided to, I don't even have words for it yet. I think, like she identified me as a girl when I was really young. She told people I was gay when I was 3 years old. She punished me for being heterosexual. She punished me for being male. And I think it's a lot of the reason why I ended up joining the Marines, was to go do something macho and masculine and to get in touch with that side of myself. And I really see where that toxicity exists on the left, and it's not being checked.
Well, let me reflect back what I'm hearing so far is that you grew up in the Bay Area, and your mother wanted a daughter and started identifying you as a girl, and that she said that you were a girl and was kind of...
She mostly said that I was gay, but yes,
that you were gay.
Encouraging femininity and punishing masculinity was sort of the MO overarching over the whole childhood.
Okay, so she was promoting femininity and suppressing masculinity.
Yes.
And that you were dealing with this issue, and then one of the reasons you feel that you went into the military to kind of strengthen that masculine aspect.
Yeah. And I see toxic behavior happening from that, that anti-masculine perspective of all things male are bad. I see a lot of that coming out of the progressive left, and I don't see any checks on where that goes too far. Mm-hmm. And that obviously is a very big personal concern for me. Like, for example, I drive Lyft a lot here in the Bay Area, and I met a kid who is 20 years old and was raised by two mothers. And he was not allowed to put his hands in his pockets in the house because they were afraid he was touching his penis. So I see situations like that. And, I empathize with that kid. I hurt for him. Like, he's being denied his masculinity, and he's not even really fully aware of it. And there's no societal check on that. There's nobody coming to help that guy. And, my heart goes out to him.
Okay, so a real concern you have about the liberal or the left is that they're suppressing masculinity, and that there's no one kind of speaking up for masculinity, and that you feel that suppression is just, you have a real kind of an issue with it, and kind of you're just sharing a story of a kid whose masculinity is being suppressed, and your masculinity was suppressed as well.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think, I see that message carrying out, across the political, that men are bad is something I hear coming out from the left a lot. And that's a lot of why I shift towards the right, of being like, hey, men are an important part of society. We need to take care of men too. Like, we want good men. What does that look like? Let's talk about that. So yeah, you have real concern about the left, demeaning men, masculinity, and it's important to support men and support masculinity, and that's like a real concern of yours and a real issue. So. Absolutely. I feel heard. Okay, great. That was the time. So I'll speak to Rick.
Okay.
There is the first thing is I forgot to mention, we had another person, a woman who's from the right, who was supposed to be here because we try to have a balance from the right and left, and she did not show up. So I did want to voice that, just kind of put that out there.
Okay. So first, you just want to voice that there was a woman on the right who was invited, and we thought she was going to come, but she hasn't shown up yet.
Yeah. So that was the first thing. The other is, really like what Taylor was saying. I went to a a progressive church that was having a counter rally to a right-wing group that was going to demonstrate in Berkeley. And they had a question and answer. This group had a question and answer period at the end. And they said, if you're a man, you have to go to the end of the line. I was like shocked. It's like, well, minorities, women, people who have been, supposedly suppressed, they get to go to the head of the line. If you're a male, you have to go to the end of the line. And I haven't been like involved in the sort of progressive left, some of this kind of groups, I guess. And I didn't realize that things had kind of come to this point. And there was, so if you're just...
Okay, so I hear you, in a sense, building on what Tyler said and saying that you were at a particular rally, and if you were a man, you had to go to the back, basically. That was their strategy to adjust things.
Yeah. I was shocked about that, because we had leaders, there were religious leaders from like a church association, of progressive churches. There was the Unitarians. This was the First Congregational Church of Berkeley. And it wasn't an official church event, but they were giving the space to sort of a religious group. So just to kind of see that, I was kind of, so I was kind of shocked. So I think it's kind of building on what Taylor is saying.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what I heard mainly is that there was a sense of shock for you in experiencing this.
Yeah, and one thing I just hear from the other person who was supposed to be here, she just posted that she was sick. So she had a little emoji that's green. So that's why she's not here. So I feel heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Evan, would you like to listen for me?
Yeah.
All right. What's coming to mind for me right now? Well, first of all, I'm appreciative of how Tyler opened it. So revealing and being in that way. It's very powerful when someone does that. And what's coming to mind for me, there's this beautiful video I saw online. It was a Black woman who's British who was speaking about wokeness 2.0. She was basically saying what I've been feeling quite a bit at times is like, yeah, there's been this backlash against you if you look, if in the left, in the progressive world, if you look or are more white and more male. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff getting thrown at you, getting thrown at me. I've experienced that, and I think I started to stay away from certain environments for a while because my nervous system, I just didn't want to put myself in that spot anymore, and so I'll just pause there.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is that, first off, you're appreciative of how Tyler opened things up. And then you said what's coming to mind for you is that you watched this video of this Black British woman who was sort of expressing the idea of this like wokeness 2.0 and, how appearing or being white male has there's kind of been a backlash against that in the progressive world. And yeah, it's even got you just sort of staying away from maybe certain progressive circles, just out of the nervous system, avoiding that feeling.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's this idea that you could look at someone and you could come up mentally with some kind of diagnosis of a number on privilege or something like that, and everything should be reoriented based on your idea of that. I think it's like a healing process that we're going through. You know what I mean? And I'd love to see us like, that's what it seems to me at the moment. I look and I'm aware everyone who's on the call right now looks to me from my eyes as male and more towards, quote, white. And I think it's kind of just a healing process that people are going through, and hopefully soon we'll all be dancing a little more together with everyone who's of different, I don't know, categories. So that's my hope in this moment.
Yeah, so you mentioned how there's sort of this labeling or diagnosing going on of like measuring up your privilege based on how you look, and you know, maybe that's you're wondering if maybe that's part of the healing process, is sort of maybe going through that backlash, and then maybe on the other side is that our spirits will sort of be dancing together.
Yes. Yeah, I've experienced being in spaces where, I see that, is that 3, David? Okay, I'm good. I'll pass it along.
Thank you, Rick.
Just one sec. I
Sure.
feel like the 3 minutes is short for this group. What do you think, Edwin? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I think maybe 5 would be good to move into 5. Usually, if it's really contentious, 3 is good to get everybody a chance, but I don't feel we're having it be real contentious. So 5 would be, we can expand.
Okay.
So yeah, Evan.
I'll select Tyler. Cool. A lot of what I'm feeling really appreciative of also of how Tyler opened it up, or how you opened up. I guess I'm speaking directly to you.
Thank you.
And I'm aligning also with a lot of the principles that both of you mentioned, Tyler and Rick. I saw that video too, and I'm like, finally, like, because if somebody made that video and they were white and male, it's just so easy then for the SJW social justice warriors to go, well, you're white, you're male, you don't have a right to talk on that. So I was really appreciative of that video. And yeah, even though it's hard for me to hear sometimes, maybe this backlash is part of the healing process. I still have a fear that I'll talk about, but maybe I'll pause there and let you reflect so far.
Okay. I heard you say that you're grateful for how I opened it. You're welcome. I'm grateful for all of you appreciating that. Sorry I know I'm sidestepping there. I'm not reflecting entirely, but yeah. And then I heard you say that you also saw the video and appreciated it, because if somebody who was white and male had made the video, then they wouldn't be able to express those views. But she had done quite well. I think I need to watch this video, by the way.
Not so much that a white person wouldn't have been able to express the same views, but just that the people on the far left would have
jumped on.
They would have been able to dismiss it a lot easier.
Okay, so I hear you saying that if the identity of the person who made that video had been a white male, then the message would have been easier to dismiss from the far left. That far left camp would have come out and dismissed what was being said, would have dismissed the content.
Right. I think honestly that's why it got so many views, because it was finally a way for like us to hear the same message, but in the medium that could potentially make it past that. And then my fear, what I've been thinking recently, my fear is that what if it's not part of the healing? It's a scary thought. But what if I've been thinking more, free will is a big topic for me, and I won't go crazy into it now because it'll be too much to reflect, but I'm scared that we still live in a religious society. And even though, you know, the far left isn't a religion, it's this sort of kind of on what you were saying, how like prosecuting males is in a way like prosecuting sins almost, or sort of just judgment overall. We still live in a very judgmental society, I guess, and that's why we're here talking about this crazy thing called empathy, as sort of a new hope. Yeah, so I guess maybe I'll leave it at that too.
Yeah. Okay. So I hear you saying that you have a fear that this isn't just growing pains and that it is actually getting worse. Did I get that fear right?
Maybe not getting worse, but just that the backlash against men is not part of the healing process.
Okay. So I hear you saying that that the animal, the backlash, I'm just going to literally say what you said, that the backlash towards men isn't part of the healing process. Yeah. That, that it and then I heard you saying that although progressivism isn't a religion, we still live in a really judgmental, it sort of still has some of those same elements of religion, of judgment and persecution. And maybe you can help me kind of encapsulate that your concern there is that is actually a destructive force, I guess, and that's actually making the situation worse.
Just sort of reflecting on maybe what how society got to this point of, for me, the way the medium that I witness it is like, on Facebook, somebody posting like, of course, another straight white male, is the shooter this time, or of course, straight white men are, responsible for most of the violence in the world. But there's no empathy to it. There's no like, well, I wonder, like, why are men so violent? Maybe they're the most in pain, that they want to kill themselves and kill others because their needs aren't getting met, and that's sort of the empathic needs-based approach that we've talked about.
So I hear you saying that that you see people throwing this, of course, straight white men are responsible for the violence. Of course, these things are happening, and that it doesn't have the follow-up of empathy, and that's concerning for you.
Right. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Cool. So it's my turn, right? Right? Yeah.
Yes, it's your turn.
Okay. We'll just keep going in a circle. We got a nice little triangle thing going here, so we'll just go right to Rick, and then I guess we'll just go around. What do I want to talk about, though? I guess the subject line that we were given was how these things are playing a role in politics. And my major concern is that people's goodwill and people's desire for righteous and good things to happen is being hijacked. And that righteousness is being turned into the same tyranny that it's attempting to replace. So, I don't know, that's a pretty abstract statement. I guess I'll let you reflect that one.
Yeah. Let me do my best to try to get that. So what I heard is that there's a concern that a kind of goodwill is being hijacked and that something bad is happening with that goodwill. Yeah. I don't think I got clarity on exactly.
Right. Well, the goodwill that I'm concerned about is the goodwill of, like, of course we want racial equality. Of course we want gender equality. Of course we want these good things. We can all sit here and look and say, everybody deserves a fair shot. Everybody deserves their place in society. And anybody who disagrees with that is obviously a piece of shit. And like, it's a good place to come from. Like, I understand that place to come from, but then that person disagreed in this way, or they said that one thing. So now I'm going to place them in the category of racist or sexist or whatever. And now I can dismiss everything they have to say, everything they've done, everything that they are. It's being used as a weapon. It's being hijacked and weaponized, essentially, in order to destroy a conversation, in order to shut somebody down and get your way. And it's not a good thing.
So what I hear you saying is that this sentiment of goodwill that things could be total, like maybe healed or inclusive, is being hijacked, and it's making it so that you can't say anything. It sounds like anything you say is going to put you in this. Anything you say that needs to be said can't come out in a good way because you'll be people are being put in this category. That's how I'm hearing it.
If something you say can be misunderstood in a way that it can be weaponized against you, that if they want to take you out and you said something that is slightly could be taken as racist or sexist, I mean, like, look at the James Damore memo, the Google James Damore memo that got the guy fired. This guy's an engineer. He's talking in engineering mathematical terms and things, and he is accurate in his language, but you could interpret it as him enforcing these sexist ideas. And that's what they did. And they fired him and they went after him. And the guy lost his job when he was answering an engineering question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it's shutting down the dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what I hear you saying there is a specific example of the Google situation. And the way I hear it is that was kind of like a statistical, mathematical kind of mind expressing something. And that got interpreted in this like horrible way. And maybe that particular person's way of experiencing the world wasn't honored, and it got miscued, and he became like an evil character I think he got fired for that.
Oh yeah, he definitely got fired.
Yeah.
But I've even talked to Google employees about that, and it's interesting the split, because there are some people who read that memo as this just horrible sexist thing and aren't able to see through and empathize with the guy that wrote it and understand that that's the way that guy thinks. And like, he's not saying those things to get those emotional reactions. He's saying those things because he's an engineer and he doesn't care about your emotions. He cares about numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's where I think that's my major concern, is that in the political realm, because that was our kind of our core topic, is that in the political realm, it's being weaponized on the left to shut down conversation from the right, to shut down difficult conversation from the right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just repeat what I'm hearing is that it's being weaponized by the left to shut down perspectives on the right. And specifically you're talking about, well, the instance you gave is like
more. But also, I'm a really big Jordan Peterson fan. I love Jordan Peterson. He's fantastic. I love his lectures. I've read his books. And seeing him misrepresented in the media and seeing his words taken and twisted and given out of context and seeing that taking place and understanding what he's really saying and understanding the difference, you're not understanding him. You are representing him in a way that allows you to dismiss him. You're not participating in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I'm good. I'm heard. Yeah. I mean, you don't even need to reflect the last bit about Jordan. I'm just Jordan fanboying at you guys.
Thank you. Who wants to be a listener? Edwin or David? Are you guys in on the?
You can choose either of us. Choose anyone you want now. I think that.
Okay. Will you be the listener, Edwin?
Sure.
Is that cool? Okay. Let's see. I want to say that I totally get the point that Tyler was making. And I feel that. And that this why this feedback, this loop is so important that we're putting into conversations right now. I feel like it's a key. Like when Buckminster Fuller said, there's a little rudder, and if you move the rudder just a little bit, a big change can happen. I kind of feel like this feedback loop can be that kind of rudder.
Mm-hmm. So you're sort of celebrating the reflective listening that we're doing, this feedback, that listening to someone this is really important, and you're just really appreciating this feedback kind of loop.
Yeah. And then, okay, there's some things on my mind that splattered through. And one thing on race I mean, that I want to say, particularly with, I mean, I'm aware that there's a crazy, I would love for the prison system to be reformed to be a totally different thing. And I'm very aware that there's a lot of, especially Black men who are in there who should not be in there. And I want to honor that totally and do stuff to change that. So I'll pause there, and I'll pause there.
Okay, so you're addressing the prison system, that there's a lot of Black men who are in there that shouldn't be there, and you're just wanting to address that and kind of, I guess, honor that or mention that before you continue.
Yes, yes. And then when you talk about all these pictures of young white people, well, whatever age they are, white men who have been terrorists within our own nation. And I think that Evan was mentioning, you know, what's going on underneath. And I feel like, yeah, it has to be said that for most men, I think emotional content has been suppressed. And that's a big contributor to violence that we see. And I do feel like that needs to be compassionately looked at.
Mm-hmm. So you're kind of speaking to that where men are judged, or that there's a lot of violence, you know, by men, and kind of looking beyond that, besides just judging it, to see what's behind it, and that you're seeing that behind that violence is the suppression of emotion, and that needs to be spoken to and addressed, or, you know, talked about.
Yes. For example, my father passed away. He got cancer when I was about 21, and he never cried. I never saw him cry, you know, and that, you know, and there's a statistic that says, like, men are like 3.5 times as likely to commit suicide as women. And that's real. It's also real that women are mistreated, and that women should be, in my opinion, that should be making the same amount of money and should be completely represented in, you know, proportionally represented in politics. You know, all that stuff is true. And sometimes the other part gets missed, that there's a level of suffering within the male that is happening as well, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're wanting to address that there is a level of suffering that's happening with men as well, and kind of speak to that suffering. And it sounds like you don't want to discount the suffering that's happening with women, and so you want to speak to that stuff, you know, not discount it, but you want to say there's suffering happening, you know, with both sides, or both.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult for people to kind of see all that, and I have a story that I tell called The Prophecy of the Great Brightening, and I use story to try to move through those mind patterns, because I think that when we get down to it, we are having similar experiences, and whatever tools we can use so that we could see and honor each other fully is what's needed most right now.
Okay, so you're sort of looking for ways of how to listen to both sides and honor both sides, and you've been using an approach around storytelling, of using storytelling to hear the stories from men and women.
Yes.
Yeah.
For everybody.
For everyone, yeah. So really hear everyone's story.
Yeah.
So I think that was 3 minutes. So I'll speak to Evan. So our topic was, you know, racism, sexism, you know, and etc. That was what was there. So for me, the essence of racism, sexism, it seems like those are just manifestations of judgment. Like it's just different forms of judgment. So we're really talking about how is it that people judge each other. So we could even strip away those other titles. It's just, we judge, you know, by sex, who the sex is. We judge by the color of someone's skin. You know, we can judge by education level, we can judge by look, we can judge by class. So there's all these different ways that people judge each other.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're saying, you know, racism and sexism are just two more types of judgment, and that there's really, you know, even if you strip away those titles, you know, there's just judgment, and you can
Yeah.
judge somebody on any one factor or any variety of factors.
Yeah, I think that so the conversation has been going that, well, let's get behind the judgments and see what's really going on for people. And that's where I see empathy is about, you know, not just seeing the judgments, getting all upset about them, and then lashing back with your own judgments. You know, it's just this perpetual, you know, culture of judgment that seems to be, you know, just, it's like, you know, you gotta like hear what's behind the judgment and turn it into a culture of empathy, which is just about hearing what is really going on. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're sort of witnessing the cycle of judgment, and, you know, you're sort of like, at some point there has to be a break in the pattern where somebody's going to practice empathy, and, you know, even if they're the ones being judged, you know, at least trying to take it in and empathize with it and say, okay, what's behind that person judging me, so that I don't judge back and continue the cycle.
Exactly. And what comes to mind is that, you know, we've been doing this empathy tent going out there in public, and Breitbart wrote about it, and so did Milo on his Facebook page. And there was like hundreds of conservatives, you know, commenting on it, and they were all demeaning, you know, oh, these libtards, these snowflakes. I mean, the amount of criticism and judgment of what we were doing was like, it was very creative, and it was just like, they're so creative in their forms of different judgment that it was kind of like amusing to me, actually.
I may have missed what Breitbart and Milo posted about.
Yeah, they just wrote about the empathy tent. Here's the empathy tent they're out there doing. Milo had a photo of the empathy tent, you know, before he came to Berkeley. He posted it, and he said, "Oh, empathy tent, ha ha." So he was kind of making fun of the empathy tent, and then Breitbart just did an article about us being in Sacramento and that we've been mediating, and they were very straightforward, not critical, just news. I thought it was a very fair kind of portrayal, but the responses from all the readers were just, oh, do they have diapers there? Is it a safe space? Is it, you know, these snowflakes, so it was just huge, all these different criticisms and judgments were kind of there.
You could shoot back at them. They're definitely not snowflakes.
That's out of turn.
So what I'm hearing is, you know, Breitbart and Milo, you know, they posted about the empathy circle, the empathy tent, and there were a lot of comments from the right saying, you know, kind of making fun of liberals, saying like, oh, these libtards, and, you know, do they need diapers and a safe space? And you're almost kind of seeing the humor in that, and just sort of putting the humor part and.
Yeah, it's like I didn't judge back, you know. I thought it was very judgmental response to what we were doing, and my response to that was, oh, great! I would love to hear what you have to say. Would you be willing to take part in an empathy circle? I would have three of you. And I want to hear and empathize with your criticisms. Let's hold an empathy circle and do that. It's like suddenly everybody became quiet. It was so funny. Suddenly it's like, suddenly they all just kind of disappeared and became very quiet when they had to like actually, you know, kind of face us, you know, instead of me lashing back to say, yes, come and share what you would like to share. So anyway.
Right, so you sort of broke the pattern, just like you mentioned before, and, you know, decided to come back with sort of kindness and realness and say, you know, how about you guys come in? Yeah, and empathy. And
yeah, I feel heard. Thanks.
Cool. I see Tyler kind of bubbling in the background. Let me select someone here. All right, let's go with Tyler then, because I'm influenced by his smiling in the background.
Sounds good.
Tyler,
I'll
will
be
you
going
listen?
here. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Um, Yeah, so I guess, yeah, I know we started off kind of in the sort of introducing and talking about some of our own feelings. And, there's also the topic to discuss of racism, sexism policies. So I'll try to get back there as well. I also, before I do that, I want to just also say I aligned with Rick on talking about, the disproportion of Black men in prison. Yeah, every time I look at the data and I do my own little Googling, yeah, it's just so disheartening. So I just wanted to second that. Maybe I'll pause there for Tyler so you can reflect that.
I heard you saying that you second what Rick was saying about the Black men in prison, and when you look at the statistics, you are also disheartened, and you agree that something needs change.
Yeah. So I guess some things that I thought about before this circle, or one thing is kind of going back on sort of moving from a religious society into maybe a more scientific society. Maybe that's part of this, is talking about the definitions for the words we use. I feel like we, as a society, I pretty much never witness, almost never, I'll say, people coming up with definitions for words before a conversation using those words multiple times begins. Maybe I'll pause there.
You think that we need to, since we're moving away from a religious society into a more scientific society, that we need to be able to agree on definitions of words, but you don't see that occurring in normal conversations.
Right. Exactly. I do see it more in academic conversations, and this is from both, maybe from both sides. I'm not sure. I mostly just have memories of people from the left talking about definitions. But so there's the dictionary definition that I looked up beforehand for racism. So this is the dictionary definition is prejudice, discrimination, and or antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior. Maybe, I don't know if I should pause there. I've never tried to do a long definition thing in a circle.
I'm not going to be able to verbatim the definition. The definition I knew for racism was holding or expressing the belief that one race is superior to another. That was the definition I knew. But sorry, you were saying that you were coming up with a definition of racism, and you were defining that so that we could move forward from there. I'll let you do the verbatim one though.
So all I was actually doing was just saying what the dictionary definition was. I'm not saying that we should use this, definition for our conversation. I just was a starting point. What I've heard from the far left and the social justice warrior type movement is that they use a different definition. So I think that's something that I've had to be careful of. Is what my sense is. There's no unified definition that I've come across. Like we've decided, the SJW movement has decided this is now the definition. But what I see around my liberal circles is something along the lines of just a system that gives advantages based on race. Basically, I'm also taking from Beverly Daniels Tatum. She's a longtime professor and advocate against racism. It's basically it's a definition which makes it so that being white by definition is to be racist by benefiting from a system that gives advantages based on race. Maybe I'll pause there.
Okay. So you read the dictionary definition, and then you're saying that you're not sure which definition we should use. But then you introduced another definition, and you were also talking about the fact that social justice warriors, there's no progressive agreed upon one definition, but the one definition that you did introduce basically makes being white inherently racist.
Exactly. And I think that kind of goes, and I'm not even saying that we should or shouldn't use any of the definitions. You know, I'm just sort of bringing them up. I think a conversation could maybe be beneficial for multiple definitions. Also, I haven't been paying attention on my time, so I'm not even sure where I'm at.
Dave will hold up when
Okay, he hasn't held it up yet. All right. So then, yeah, it kind of, I guess, one thing I thought of is that definition of racism really gives the weaponized effect that you talked about earlier, where, you know, you can then use that to shut people down and say, well, by my definition of racism, you're a racist, you're white. And it's just, yeah, it's sort of I mean, I find it to be a hurtful label when you call that someone to their face, even if the definition is so factual that, you know, yeah, sure, by that definition, yeah, we're all racist, but doesn't take away the association that I've been brought up with, that it's a bad thing to be racist, which is, I think in society it's used more of like not necessarily a definitive word, but more of like a feeling word. It doesn't really have a definition. It's just sort of used differently in different contexts. And I guess I'll pause there.
Okay, I hear you saying that those sorts of slippery definitions can be used to sort of paint somebody into a corner, and it's part of the weaponization of language, to basically say, I have my own definition and that makes you this, and now you're beholden to it. And it sort of allows people to restructure the facts and restructure the argument to shut down discourse, essentially.
Maybe not restructure facts, but sure, restructure the discourse for sure.
Yeah. Not. I didn't mean like restructure. Like, yeah.
Yeah, no.
The which facts you're paying attention to, or yeah, you know what I mean.
Cool. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
So my turn then.
Yep.
Who to go at? I kind of want to just keep it in the. I was just going to keep going back to Rick for right now, just to leave, not to neglect David and Edwin, but yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about some of the stuff that you were talking about, Rick. I'd taken some notes here. In particular, male suffering. That I definitely think that there is. I don't know how to address the toxic masculinity question, but I do think that the lack of empathy for men and the lack of emotional expression that men are put into a position can get frustrated and angry and violent, and that problem isn't addressed with empathy. And I think I just wanted to agree with you on that and say that I think that is a good place to start to solve that one. Yeah, I'll let you reflect that.
I hear you agreeing with something that I brought up earlier, and what I hear you saying is that men don't have as much opportunity to express emotion, and this probably contributes to the violence that we see men engage in. I think that's what you said. Yeah,
I feel heard there. I just, one of the weird things that I found when I was dealing with my own situation was that I don't have like a number, but it's pretty much every male serial killer that ever targeted women was dressed up as a girl as a child by their mother. I just thought that sort of misogynistic result and the suppression of masculinity early, I think there's a correlation there. And I think healthy masculinity is what I want to be talking about and what I think we should be talking about when it comes to men. And then I'll move on to a different subject.
Okay. Yeah, so I hear what you're longing for. What you want to talk about is healthy masculinity. You might have used a different word, healthy masculinity, and you were acknowledging this, that a lot of men who committed these horrible acts of violence were treated when they were young as were not shown ways to express their masculinity, and were mistreated when they were younger.
And I think that, yeah, I think there's a connection between that and their ultimate horrible acts, that they weren't shown how to grow their masculinity in a healthy way, and we end up with a monster.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want monsters in our society. Then the other thing on my notes here, I think the definitions of language is a very, very good point, that the words that we use and what they mean determine the playing field that we're all maneuvering in. And I think that a lot of those language games are being played to the left's advantage. That if you have a conservative view and you're expressing that view, you have to be more careful with your language, and your language is more susceptible to being twisted. So it's harder to get heard if you have a more conservative point of view.
Okay. So I hear you saying that it's harder to get heard if you have a more conservative point of view, and that it has to do with how language is being used on the left specifically, and
Right.
definitions of things.
Right. And restructuring the definition in order to gain an advantage in discourse is the action I see taking place that I think there's a problem with. That racism means what racism means. We all have to agree on a definition, and then we can talk about it. If systemic racism is systemic racism, that's something different than one-to-one individual, person-to-person racist. And if we can't talk about those as separate ideas, then we can't discuss them as a society, if we can't differentiate and agree.
I hear you talking about the way race is being defined and how it corners it can corner the conversation and has to be redefined so that we can talk about it. I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
Right. That language stuff is important, and in order to be able to have empathy and to discuss these things as a society, we do need to have good, solid language that we can agree on so that our ideas are clear to each other. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You got it. I feel heard.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right. Evan, would you like to listen? Okay. I'm going to try to talk about race a little bit more. It hurt me a lot the way things have been in the last few years, because I was someone who thought I did a lot to help to heal racial divides. And the pain, the way I see it, the pain and the wounding, that's very deep, that's from multi-generations, especially with all these killings that happened on video. You know, they haven't been, it doesn't seem like we're seeing those as much, but for a while, you know, it was like every week, Black people were being traumatized by, you know, another Black person killed on video, you know, that everyone saw. And that created a scenario where the trauma that Black people were going through, in my opinion, would make they would look at you and they would just see, if your skin is more towards this than Black, they would see all this all this pain would come up, you know. It's real. And I'll just pause there for a moment.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've been feeling this hurt feeling. And you started off by mentioning how you thought you were doing a lot to heal the racial divides. And then in the past few years, you know, there's been all these videos of Black people being shot and killed, and just acknowledging how traumatizing that is for the Black community, and how you think that it creates a scenario where when they see more light-skinned people, that all this pain can come up.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. And so in the most amazing moments of my life, there's been no race. I mean, and I do think it's mainly caused, as Edwin is saying, from judgment or from fear, and it's been woven into our society. But you know, if 400 years ago or whenever these things were started, if these were more evolved people who didn't look at people from fear of the other, then we wouldn't have to have, you know, it comes from that. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm trying to acknowledge that there is no race in a sense, and there is also. It's both, you know?
So you're saying how there's kind of this harmony when there's no race, and that it's like, you know, it really is just judgment, right? And in that sense, you could say like how there's no race, but at the same time there is. And so you're expressing this sort of duality to the nature of the topic.
Yeah, yeah, and I believe now that it is important to I do think there's a thing called institutional racism, but there can be racism in any situation, in my opinion. There's always power dynamics. So if I go into a situation where there's all Black people, I mean, or all women, you know, and it changes in a given scenario. In my opinion, I don't like the idea that it just flows in one direction. I mean, I feel like that's sort of the trap that we've fallen. It seems like we can fall into. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying how there's institutional racism, and then there's concepts of more like anecdotal maybe racism, where, you know, you're talking about an individual walking into a group, and it could be, you know, you and an individual walking into a group of Black people or a group of women, and so it the idea maybe of the other, you know, could exist in any situation.
Yeah, when I was traveling in Jamaica by myself, you know, I'd go on a bus, and I'll be the only person who's not Black on that bus, and sometimes there'd be a person who would be angry at me, you know, and be really angry at me just because I'm white, and there would be other people who would be very loving toward me. And so for me, I feel like in that situation, to me, that's a form of racism. You know what I mean? That's how I see it.
Yeah. So you're talking about how you can walk on and be in Jamaica and be on a bus full of Black people, and you're the only white person, and there could be somebody who's really angry at you because of that, and then there's people who are also loving. Mm-hmm. So you would say that falls under your sort of category of racism as well.
Yeah, I see the 3 seconds. I'm just trying to like expand and play with the definition that we have by giving examples. That's what I'm attempting to do.
Yeah, so just sort of exploring the definition and the different sides of it.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I will select Tyler. You have some notes that I brought. Seeing if that sparks anything real quick. I guess one thing I'll say is that, yeah, I think going off of what a lot of what we've been talking about is just maybe the idea of tribalism, and that maybe it's scary what happens with the far left, labeling everyone as one of their methods, is that it sort of like just adding another tribe to it, or trying to cure tribalism with more tribes, and putting people in different categories. And I think that's what we talk a lot about with empathy and trying to stop that cycle of judgment. Yeah, it's tough. Maybe I'll pause there.
I hear you saying that a lot of the problem is tribalism, and then it doesn't seem to make sense to then try to solve that by breaking the tribes down even further. Is that essentially what you were getting at?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think I've always put my sights on free will as one of the biggest blocks to empathy. I feel like I had to analyze that in myself when I first started discovering, moving away from what I think our language is still based on a religious society. Because even though a lot of people nowadays are not religious anymore, I think our language is still very much come out of viewing people as right and wrong and judging good or bad, and you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't have done this. Articles, are titled, "Is it racist to do this? Is it wrong to do this? Is it okay? Should he have done that?" And that's, since part of the sensationalism that gets views, but it gives us the idea that we can judge what's right and what's wrong, and we can state it as a fact, and just be stuck in this endless cycle of judgment. Maybe I'll pause there. I know I'm ranting a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm hearing the correlation of the idea of free will and religion, and the fact that we come from a religious society. And so instead of the judgment being God said you should or shouldn't do this, we're coming up with our own judgment of, is this racist? Isn't it? Is this that? Isn't it? And that sensationalism is driving a lot of the media and driving a lot of the push of it. But at its core, it's still just another form of judgment, and not really an advancement from the religious society. Did I get that right?
Yeah, totally. And I think I can even tie this back to male suffering. One of the things I was thinking about was just like the analogy of like a dog that bites people. When we think about a dog, we don't think about like, oh, it's because he's a dog. Like, well, maybe some people do, but usually there's more empathy for animals because we don't assign, at least in my experience, maybe we don't assign like this idea of like free will to them as much as we do for humans, because we usually don't induct animals into our religions, as far as I know. As being able to like discern right from wrong and that sort of thing. Yeah, and I see it as like it's just like one of the oldest methods of control is to come out and claim that what's right and what's wrong, and then use that to punish people, and that's what free will was invented for. I imagine the idea of it. It's just an idea that's never been proven.
I hear you saying that, if a dog bit someone, the dog would be given more empathy because it would be seen as sort of the nature of the dog, whereas humans aren't given that same leeway because they're seen as having the free will and having the consciousness capable of selecting between, what's right and what's wrong, and that I shouldn't bite someone, essentially. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I guess, okay. I guess just to sum it up, to maybe sprinkle some hope on it, is I hope that, just the same way that we would maybe analyze a dog's behavior and say, well, when did he start biting? What can we do to prevent it? That the conversation becomes more about that and sort of analyzing the needs, and just that's kind of the empathic route. And you could put that on the prison system, anything, just sort of how do we make sure everyone's needs are met, that we're all not see what actually correlates to the behavior that we don't want.
Right. So I hear you saying that the way to solve the problem with the dog is to ask why the dog's biting and to show the dog some empathy. And then you could train the dog to not bite by putting it in better situations, essentially. And so using that same logic with humans and figuring out how to get people's needs met so that they don't feel a need to bite, finger quotes, is the empathetic approach, and in your opinion, the better approach.
Yeah, I guess, sorry, I'll wrap it up with just one last sentence on that, which is just like free will is the total block to that thinking. Nobody will ever go with that thinking as long as free will stands in your way, because it's like you'll always have that sort of what I think of a religious thought. No, they shouldn't have. They had the chance. That was the free will sort of magical moment to jump out of your nature, I guess, sort of what we know, what we see and observe and can study.
I'm a little confused on that. You're saying that other people are going to be judgmental of other people because they know that they have free will, so they know you have free will, so they expect you to be able to make a better decision, and they're not going to forgive you for reacting to your past as easily. Is that kind of like that?
Sorry, I got lost, but
if the person, if it's a human being that has been through a bunch of experiences and then is now incarcerated or something like that, that giving them empathy into how they got there and how they became that way.
Yeah, that's essentially what I was saying.
Yeah.
The last bit I just added was that I'm just worried that as long as you believe in free will, you're always going to be able to say, oh, they shouldn't have, they knew better. They had a chance in their mind, a little free magical bubble in that moment before they did a bad behavior, and they should be, and that leads to they should be punished because there was free will, and that sort of thing. But yeah.
Right, so the free will becomes the rationalization for guilt, for placing the blame on the person entirely.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Gotcha. All right. I'm just going to keep the circle going then. Over to Rick, unless we have something else we need to, right? Keep it rolling, right?
It's your choice.
Yeah, we'll just keep it rolling right back to Rick. Let's see. I guess I haven't really talked too much about race. I wanted to talk in particular about Black Lives Matter. I spent 7 years in the Marine Corps Infantry. I did 2 tours. I deployed to Djibouti, Africa, just north of Somalia in 2006. I deployed to southern Afghanistan, to the Helmand region of Afghanistan in 2009. I have a lot of friends who are in law enforcement. It is, I cannot deny that Black men are in a disadvantaged and an unfair position. I cannot deny that. The reason I didn't join Black Lives Matter was because it wasn't about fixing the problem. It was about expressing anger and violence, in my opinion. And with my military background and what I know about law enforcement, why weren't we talking about rules of engagement, standard operating procedure, and there's a bunch of these acronyms for it, but basically the rules by which that police officer has to explain how he engaged. That's a legal thing. We can change that. We should be targeting that, because then when we see those videos, and if that police officer gets acquitted, well, we rewrite the rules so that guy doesn't get acquitted. That's the conversation I thought we should have been having. And because it wasn't about that, it was about going out and picking a fight with a cop, I'm out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hear you. What I hear you saying is that you would have been a part of Black Lives Matter. You acknowledge that there's a disparity going on, but that the way it happened, it was very angry and not productive. It sounds like that you're identifying a particular approach of dealing with law enforcement that it sounds like of from your background, that would have been a way of really changing things, and that wasn't what was being wasn't happening
Yeah, that wasn't the priority. That wasn't what people were trying to do. That the priority to me seemed to be a theatrical expression of anger and violence. And in particular, I take major problem with violence. I'm an expert in violence. I'm absolute, and I fully understand. With my experience in Southern Helmand, we used to go on patrols where we would take off our body armor, put down the rifle, and swim with the kids. Because if you're playing with someone's children, they're not going to shoot you. Empathizing with people, drinking tea, sitting down and spending time with them, what we're doing right here, this works. This very seriously works. And so when it breaks down and it becomes about breaking things, destroying things, setting shit on fire and starting a fight, I'm out.
I hear you. Yeah. I totally hear you, but I'll reflect back anyway, just to make sure. You're talking about being in the military and playing with people's kids as a way of creating safety. And and what we're doing here, you're acknowledging that this works and that violence doesn't work, and you don't want to be a part of violence. That's
yes,
mainly what I heard.
Yep. That was, and that was my main apprehension behind getting involved with a movement like that put violence so far up front. That's my main problem with Antifa. It's not okay to come out, target somebody, and say, I'm going to hurt that person because they disagree with me. That's not okay. That's never okay. And so the second that an organization is doing that up front and publicly, and we're not calling them out, that's a problem. That's a major problem. And so those events were a lot of my beginning to empathizing more with the right, is watching those being mishandled, particularly here in the Bay Area, where it led to a lot of violence.
So what I heard towards the end is that your connection to, I guess, the right or whatever, I'm not sure what. Conservatism,
yeah. Thinking this way.
It came from this situation with Antifa, which I'm also not totally familiar with, but that the way it was handled, you're saying it was people on the left and it was violent, and you don't want anything to do with that, and it was handled in a certain way that puts you...
Well, between that and Black Lives Matter, and when I raised my hand and said, hey, you guys, I don't think this is how we should be handling this. And the flack I caught from that went, wait a second, I'm not down with this. Yeah. That, I could not raise my hand during Black Lives Matter and say, hey, we should be doing this. I'm not going to get listened to in that group. I got shot down real fast. And that was the beginning of me empathizing more with the right. Yeah. Pass it around. I think I'm good.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dave?
I just want to, I'd like to have a chance to somehow participate because I feel a bit.
I was just going to ask you, David.
Okay.
Do you want to be my listener, or do you want to just jump in right now and speak?
No, you can speak to him. Let's keep the process going.
Okay.
Speak to Dave.
I was just thinking about that, David. So I'll probably be brief. That last image that Tyler expressed from his life of knowing he's not going to get listened to in a Black Lives Matter meeting. I mean, that's something that came up earlier with me. I was at a progressive meeting, and this was a couple of years ago when stuff started happening. I guess Trump got elected, and that's what did everything or something. But I'm not usually the one who's speaking the most, and there's this sentiment that you should not, because you're perceived in a certain way, you're a male, that you shouldn't have a certain time to speak in some of these situations is really, it's been going on and it's not good at all. You know, I don't know if it's still going on because I think I just stopped going. So I'll pause there. I think I rambled a bit.
So you empathize with what Tyler's saying about not being listened to. You've had that experience yourself, being a white man, and you think it's not a good thing.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anything that's important to be said. It's just, it's just better. It's better for everyone, I think, to be in spaces where everyone's honored. And I guess all that was an attempt to level the playing field in somehow, but there's a lot of assumptions in that. You know, when you, I'm talking about situations I was in, when you assume that, say, a woman or someone who's transgender or someone who's of color should have more time to speak. There's a lot of assumptions going on in that, because we're all different, we're all wired differently, and we all have different experiences.
So this sort of hierarchy of victimization, where the people higher on the hierarchy get priority. There's a lot of assumptions that go into this hierarchy, I guess is what you're saying. You know, because we don't really know actually what's going on for each of these people. So
Yeah.
that there's assumptions being made that may not apply actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair. I'm good. So I'm heard. I could pass along, and
Okay.
seems like energy.
What were you going to say?
I'm just saying it seems like energetically that's what needs to happen. Let's move it along.
I mean, you still had a minute.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. I'll speak to Tyler. The reason I raised my hand is, I mean, look, I agree with pretty much everything everybody's saying here, but I feel there's something that isn't being said, which is that the reason the left talks this way and has taken all this on is because I think they felt that, you know, it evolved because people were not being heard. And it became, you know, okay, you're not going to listen to me, so fuck you. I'm not going to listen to you. And I'm going to create language which makes it so that I don't have to listen to you.
I hear you saying that the reason that the left has gotten this far is because people weren't getting heard. And so eventually that frustration boiled over, and that's what led to the conflict of fuck you, I'm not going to listen. And that just has turned into a cycle on both sides, I think is what you're saying, right? That both people are going, fuck you, I'm not going to listen.
Well, I think, now, people on the right feel like they're being demonized. And in a sense, it's like this cycle of demonization that you guys are all talking about. But I think the problem is, when, like you started with acknowledging, of course, we all want this, we all want a gender-free, and we all want, a racist-free society. But I think about, like, if you think about what goes on with global warming, I think there's a certain amount of the same thing that goes on with this left-right stuff culturally. With global warming, the left certainly seems to agree with scientists, and then, the policy on the right, whatever individual people think, but the policy of the Republican Party has been to deny that it exists, and so we end up arguing about whether it exists or not, instead of whether we should do anything about it. And that's really frustrating. And I think there's a certain amount of that, like this question of race. You know, if white people refuse to acknowledge that there is institutional racism or systemic racism, in the sense of it's not the same for us to be walking around on the street, you know, in a white neighborhood as it is for a black person to be walking around. You know, racism exists for everybody. But in our society, it's been a particular disadvantage to be black. And that needs to be acknowledged, you know, and when it's not acknowledged, it creates a problem. So I said a lot.
Yeah.
I
think
that
you're mostly saying about the problems being acknowledged, that things aren't being acknowledged. That's
right,
kind
I
of
think
core.
problems need to be acknowledged. You know, at the beginning, that's a way of diffusing things also. You know, like, I acknowledge that this is a problem. I just don't agree with how you're talking about solving the problem. That's a different position.
Right. So I hear you saying that identifying, recognizing, and agreeing on the problems is part of the problem in your estimation of things. Being able to get acknowledgement from the right on things like climate change and systemic racism is step one to moving towards solutions, but even acknowledging the problem is an issue.
Yeah, I mean, let me check the clock here. Yeah, I guess my time is up. Yeah, I feel heard.
So, yeah, I'll talk to Edwin, since we've left Edwin out for a little bit. Well, for one, I definitely think I have mostly liberal views on a lot of subjects. In particular, when it comes to climate change, I definitely think that a lot of people on the right drop the ball. So I definitely recognize that one's an issue we probably agree on. But for things like the transgender question, I don't think there's any such thing as a transgender child. And I think that an adult that is putting their child on hormone blockers is tantamount to trying to electrocute the gay out of your kid. It's abuse. It shouldn't be done, but it's something that is happening. So, yeah, I don't know. It does seem to be that recognizing, it's sort of like, yeah, there's a lot of science on gender, but you try to discuss that gender science with a lot of people and they shut that down a lot, like the climate science gets shut down. Mm-hmm. And it's a general problem. I think this is the solution. Empathy is the solution, and actually taking the time to listen and listen to the science, listen to the facts, listen to people's emotions and opinions. I think we are enacting the solution.
Okay, so you're addressing saying that you have a lot of liberal views, in terms of the climate change and the science around that, you feel that we probably have an agreement, or you would agree with Dave about that there's sort of a consensus, but that, for example, around the gender issues, that you see that as different, that there's sort of science around it as well that maybe is not being acknowledged by the left, I think. Yeah. And that really, that there's, it's kind of like more complicated, and to really address this, that what we're doing here with the dialogue, the listening, is really the way to address it. So there are, liberals too, are not maybe necessarily going for the science too. It's not only conservatives. So you kind of want a bit of balance.
Acknowledgement that science, that science is, the ignoring of science isn't a uniquely conservative thing. Although I know I'm taking the conservative stance here, and so I feel an obligation to acknowledge that I don't agree with what those people are doing. Like, I don't agree with what they're saying. I'm not on the same page with everything. But that, yeah, the gender issue is a major one for me personally, obviously, because of my experience. And so that's the one where I really get riled up when people ignore the science. That's why things like Jordan Peterson and James Damore are very compelling to me, because they discuss the science, and we can talk about, differences in men and women in a way that isn't just going to get shut down and shut up, that we can be like, oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah. People do behave that way. Yeah.
So you're a fan of Jordan Peterson and James Damore, because they were trying to address some of these issues with science, and that so the left is sort of shutting down dialogue around the science on this. So, and this is the topic that you have real, personal interest in, and yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess, right, but I'll just chuck this in before I get out and kind of address the trolliness of the right with regard to the Breitbart article. I still think those guys are funny. I was laughing hysterically when you were saying that. I think them reacting that way is funny. I don't know how serious they are being about it, but yeah, like the snowflake stuff. I get where a lot of those guys are coming from. I think that stuff is funny, the trolling and stuff, but it does get out of hand at some points. Like, I was involved in the NPC thing. I think that's hilarious. I still think the NPC thing is funny. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of like a whole nother can of worms to crack into with regards to the dark web and Trump and Pepe and Kekistan. I don't know how much about this you all know, but it's a weird part of the right. Yeah. If you guys don't know about Kekistan, and then you don't know how Trump got elected.
Okay, so
go ahead.
So you're just a story I told about how the right kind of reacted to us on Breitbart and on Milo's site. That you actually just see that as very humorous, and you see it as really funny, and just you're sort of like tickled by the right, how they have their memes and all this kind of stuff that they do. So there's a sense of humor. You see kind of have a sense of humor about what they're doing. It looks like that was the time.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to offer the opportunity for the discussion of the weird sort of conservative internet culture that I am somewhat a part of, that some people might be foreign to. That's there. It's a thing.
Yeah. So you've been playing around with this weird conservative internet culture, and it's just wanted to kind of share a little bit about it, the nature of it.
Yeah. Make sure you guys know
you're having fun with it. Okay. Yeah, so I'll speak to Evan. Yeah, let's see. Well, I'm really, pleased that Tyler is talking about empathy as the way forward, because I see in what we're doing, all these different issues. It's I think we're all supportive here of empathy being, sort of the way forward. So it's, really glad to hear that from everyone.
You're sort of celebrating how, Tyler saying how empathy is the way forward, and seems like, that pretty much puts everyone here in favor of empathy, and sort of appreciate that that's, the direction we're going with things.
And but I also think in terms of like, what can we do to be that the empathy movement can be more of a player in a sense in the larger culture and the dynamics. Like, we took the empathy tent, the other week to Sacramento. We were actually there at a right-wing rally with the empathy tent, offering listening. And so we were right there on the Capitol steps of Sacramento, and we were out there in public, and it was kind of cool because I was just wearing this T-shirt. I walked by, and we didn't even have the empathy tent set up there, and they saw the tent. They saw the sign said empathy tent. So they knew about us. So the word was kind of getting out there, and I know that Ben something, Bergman, I think, or Bergsman, on the right, he came to the empathy tent and did a little, we had a little interaction. He recorded it, and it was like 30. I saw the video. 35,000 people saw that, so that kind of got us out there, So I'm just thinking of what we can do to be more effective, to us being a social presence instead of, being a real actor or real presence in this whole political dynamic that's going on.
Yeah, so you're wondering, what the empathy movement can do to become like a bigger player in the scheme of things. And you mentioned how like you went out and you got like a shout out because of the shirt, and
a couple times, yeah.
And how someone came by and did a video of participating in the empathy tent, and how that video got like 35,000 views. So just sort of starting seeing these sparks of attention, and wondering what we can do to ignite further.
Yeah, like could we set up an encampment? I was thinking like on the steps of the state capitol, and maybe even work with the right wing. Say, look, you guys are a real minority. You all are a real minority here in Sacramento. How about we will work with you to have the Democrats do empathy circles with conservative, council assembly members in Sacramento, so that we could drive this message into like the state capitol. Like, we're going to stay here on the steps of the state capitol until, the liberal and conservative assembly members have empathy circles with each other.
Yeah, so you're wondering if it might be a good idea to like sit on the Capitol steps and reach out to conservatives, because they feel like they're in the minority, in Sacramento. So there might be interest from their side to get some more traction or attention with an empathy circle, with meeting with Democrats, and that way we can drive empathy into the more political people who are actually representing us politically.
Yeah, into the mainstream, into the news media, so to get more attention. So there's that part. And the other is, I've thought of like movements, like Black Lives Matter, or the, even women's suffrage, or, the civil rights movement, that if it tends to be sort of people going for their own self-interest, right? They have their issue and they go for their own self-interest, like, women's suffrage, getting the vote. But if it had been framed as, we want everyone to be heard, right? We want every voice to matter. We not only want you to listen to us, we want to listen to you, and we want you to listen to each other. So even the LGBT, rights issues was not just about our little group getting heard and getting power and getting acknowledgement, but that it's that as well as everyone being heard. So it becomes really, because that's sort of what unites all those different movements, is everybody's feeling like they're not being heard and they want a voice. And if we advocate for really an empathy movement of everyone being heard, that would be, potential strategy there. I'm moving into strategies.
Yeah, so you're talking about how, a lot of individual advocate groups, advocate for their own rights. Just sort of noticing that that's how typically things have been done. And then one thing that you like about the empathy movement is that it's not focused on a group, or, like a specific group. It's saying how we want everyone to be heard. So it's all groups in, sort of integrated into one movement, and how that could be sort of a strategy almost to make it really take off.
Yep, I feel heard. Thank you.
Cool. Exciting. I guess one thing that I'd like to, oh, sorry, I need to select someone. Rick. Cool. So one thing that I'd like to see more in conversations, I forget what I mentioned earlier that I don't see enough of. Oh, definitions. Yeah, so we don't see enough definitions, because it's an argument, I think, tends to become less of an argument when we're actually define something, because then you could just measure it and say, okay, yep, that fits the definition. There's no room to disagree when you have a definition, a non-feelings based definition, sort of. But then I think another thing that might be fun to bring up is more application. I feel like the right and the left, maybe we're in a lot of mediums and channels, we're stuck in philosophy arguments, or even in internal, liberal discussions, liberals talking with liberals, that we're talking about philosophy a lot of time, but then we never get to application. Maybe I'll pause there.
Okay. The first part I heard was about definitions, and it sounds like you're speaking of that as a strategy to clarify some things so that we hear each other more clearly, I think. And then you also talked about application, maybe moving away from a conversation that's happening in certain circles and applying things in some way.
Yeah, exactly. So and that's just sort of an introduction to the topic, but I'll get into an example just to make it more concrete. So, a lot of us talked about how, we're disheartened or sad or feeling hurt about, the pain that the Black community has been through, and the, the literal statistics that we can all look at of, Black people being disproportionately put into the prison system. What I'd like to see more of conversations, that being an example, is something like, what can we do? And I do see that, here and there, but I think, people get really excited and heated, when it comes to like the arguing portion. And then sometimes I know it takes for me a little bit of extra just self-motivation just to say, okay, hey, what can I actually do to contribute? So, maybe coming up with nonprofits that are doing certain activism that, maybe need more resources. I really like the ideas that Edwin's talking about, like, actually getting politicians involved, because they have so much more power than the average citizen to impact law. Maybe I'll pause there.
Okay, so I hear that doing and applying is alive for you, and you're thinking about ways to do that, either ways to get into to help the movement towards helping Black people in some way, or with Edwin to get people from different sides to sit down together, but applying things, taking action.
Yeah. Another example is that we often talk about gaps in resources, income, between different racial groups, in America. And I searched once on Google to try and see if there was an activist group particularly focused on income equality. And maybe I'm just not good at searching, but I literally could not find one. And I was really interested in that. Just for the proportion of how much we talk about it, and then how much people are, doing activist work towards that topic. So I'll pause there. I have another thought on that, but
So one issue that you'd like to take action on is income inequality, and you did a search, but you didn't find that much actual either. I think it's actual information or actual ways to take action. Is that what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, there's sort of different strategies. Obviously, there's people who try to do activist works themselves and try to, go attack things head on and sort of say, okay, well, I'm going to, work on this school, and get funding for a school in this neighborhood and things like that. And then there's people who try to target politicians and say, well, if we could just get a law passed that would, affect, what we have to do sort of to the law, so I think there's two different approaches, and there's different people doing different things.
So to me, it sounds like you're noticing that there's these two different approaches, and maybe considering how you might take take it on. One would be like make a school better, and the other would be maybe deal with policy, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess just to wrap it up, to sum it up, I wish that more people on social media who are posting, lots of heated memes and all these things, I wish there would be a little link. So like, here's what I'm doing to help, and if you want to join me, here's a link and things you can do.
So with social media, you wish that it wasn't just about memes, that there was more action-oriented things.
Yeah, thank you. I feel fully heard.
Cool.
Okay, so we're coming closer to the end here. If you just want to do one more, maybe at least a 3-minute or so round, and then we'll probably have to close after this one. We'll do a round of just feedback from everyone.
Okay. So Tyler, do you want to listen?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I didn't get to speak to you yet in this way, and I'm glad you came. I've met Evan and David and Edwin, so you're a new person for me, and I appreciate that you're here. And all the stuff you were saying about Kakistan, and I have no idea. I have no idea. So I'm somewhat curious and somewhat a little scared to know what's going on.
I'll send you some links.
So I'll pause there and
All right. I hear you saying, I'm a new person in the circle for you, and you're appreciative of new information and new input.
Yeah. That's it. That's great. Yeah. I don't think I really have anything else to say. I'm good.
Okay. I'll talk to Evan to keep the circle going, since we're just going to kind of wrap them up here real quick.
Well, we have 10 minutes left for this circle, so we could just go around, each person just sort of a final comment without even reflection, just sort of kind of anything, final words to say for like about a 2-minute.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just wanted to speak to what Evan was talking about with what to do, because my conservative brain doesn't want to wait for the government. I don't want to have to do anything to do with legislation or the government or anything. That we should be able to solve this on our own as citizens without requiring somebody to tell us that we can. And there are cultural things that are very challenging that we could do, such as quit referring to people as black and white. If you just stop thinking about people as belonging to two different categories, now you're just dealing with humans. I realize that that's an ideological leap, but nobody can stop you. If you really think that way and you talk that way and you discuss things that way, and that is how you approach things, is from a human place, you don't need legislation. You don't need statistics to be a human, I guess. Other than that, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. Very often as a conservative thinker in liberal circles, I do get shut down and talked over, and I feel very unheard a lot of the time. And I appreciate the circle. I appreciate being listened to, and I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thanks. So I just go around. Dave, do you want to kind of give a final wrap up? You're muted.
I want to thank you all for being here. I actually, I didn't say, but I work with Edwin. We have been going together to these protests in Berkeley and in California, where there's a sort of, far right and far left, and trying to get people to talk to each other. It's difficult, usually. I think this is one thing I feel is like we could go further with this conversation, and we haven't really worked this out, in our process, but how we could do, I hope you guys will continue to participate in these these circles can get deeper so that we can get to deeper ground. Like I think what Tyler just said was really interesting idea. So anyway, I'm happy that we're all doing this, and I want to. I mean, I think what we can do right now, anyway, is bring more people into these circles. Tell people, Tyler, we don't have enough people on the right. We need more people. It's easy for us to get people on the left, but we don't have enough people on the right. So that's it.
And Rick?
Yeah, I think that's on my mind too, is how to get more people of different backgrounds to be engaging, whether in person or online. I mean, yeah, I'm into brainstorming that.
And how was the meeting for you, the circle?
It was good. It was good. Yeah, I think we could have gone deeper in certain ways, but it's good. It was good to just connect and listen. And it's. I think relationship building is a part of this, and that takes time, and so we're doing it.
Okay, thanks, Evan.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the circle. Yeah, I mean, I just appreciate the process so much, and how different it is from how much the pros you get out of this process, especially when you compare it to just like what tends to happen with standard dialogue. It's just great, and I want to continue to be a part of it, help in any way I can, and yeah.
Okay, so I'm hearing appreciation for the process, as well as kind of a desire to continue, as well as go deeper. So that's definitely, everyone's welcome to continue ongoing circles, take part in these dialogues, to eventually become a facilitator as well, and for us to spread it. I will say that Alicia, who is going to be here too on the conservative side, she did say that she was sick, and she said vomiting, whole house sick with flu. So it's not that she didn't want to be here. She wanted to be here last week as well, and something came up in this week. So we'll definitely, I think she'll take part in one of the future ones as well. With that, I'll close the circle, and if you could stay on, I'm going to record just a second benefits of what you see, the benefits of this process, just to have that as a separate recording. So with that, we'll close the circle, and I will stop the recording.